I really personally can't complain. What's going on with you?
Yeah, the horrors persist, but so do I.
Yeah.
Like it's raining for like first good October rainy day, so I'm stoked. I'm gonna cook some mushrooms tonight. That's gonna be nice. Did an interesting kind of like in conversation last night about this book I read, Eve, which is kind of like about evolutionary the adaptations in female bodies, which was interesting. And it was nice to kind of like think about science for a while. So I did that, and that was killer. And it was just very funny also because Kat Bonin, who wrote it, she's also American, and it was just quite funny because it just like got really like they had mics there, and we were just like, no. We won't be using those, and things because we're already loud. And it was just kind of funny to be around another American in that kind of like space. But yeah, I also bumped into a friend, a fan of the show, Anna.
Fun.
Shout out Anna. Hey, what's up, girl?
Hey.
Who came and chatted to me after. And Anna and I agreed that we want you to be more confident in your abilities as an amateur historian. And as someone who bigs himself up, which I know you're going to refuse to.
I do not appreciate being slandered in such a way. Oh man, no, I'm terrible at it. And I know I'm terrible at it, and I don't know why. But
it's
just
it's British coded. It's
man, come on, let's not say things we can't take back.
Yeah.
No, I just I've just never been any good at it. It's like
you say that, and yet I find that you have a keen analytical mind and are very able to put together interesting conversations. So
I appreciate that. I really do.
We're out here ganging up on you. We're in the streets. We're in the basement of Gower Street Waterstones, complimenting you behind your back. How you like that?
The opposite of what I conjure in my head. It's how dare you? How dare you do that to me? No, I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. My wife says the same thing, and I don't know. I'm really bad at like taking compliments. I always have been because like I don't know why. Like, and it's not like I'm bad at taking them from like anyone, from my friends, from my wife, because like, and it's not like with other people it might be like, oh well, they're just trying to trick me. But like I mean, if my wife's doing that, she's like, why are you pulling this like 17-year long con here? I don't have any money for it, so it's like I'm just terrible at taking compliments, and I always have been, but I appreciate it, and you're right. I should be more assertive in the fact that I I remember things sometimes.
What I started doing in order to take compliments better, because I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, is it's much easier, I think. What I usually say, and this has really helped me also take them and then also be able to sit with it, is I say, that's incredibly kind of you to say. And that's like a nice way of doing it, and then you can kind of sit with it, and it doesn't make it feel like you're bragging.
Yeah.
And like, and then you can sit with it better, and the better you can sit with it, the more you can kind of, take it on board. But yeah, no, I think that it's an interesting one, right? Because like, I think you don't get to my position without being a bit of like a Lisa Simpson, right? Like you don't like, ultimately I'm like, grade me, evaluate me, like constantly. Yeah, but at the same time, I don't actually wish to be graded and evaluated, like I just want, but wanting gold stars, that's a part of it. But on a piece of paper where like, I don't want anyone to say it to my face. Like, let's not be weird.
I don't have like a praise kink or anything. Let's not go crazy. I don't.
Okay, I want to make that clear. I want to make it clear no one has a praise kink. Right?
No, I'm like, yeah, I just like, I don't even know why. I like it when people like say nice. Oh, like, oh, you know, I like it when people say nice things to me. I don't like. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even make sense. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, what is, you know,
What is this
what is causing
about?
you to do? I have no idea. Yeah, it could be in regards to like the podcast and history stuff is that it's much easier for me to hide behind that when people are like, "Oh, you said something wrong." I'm like, "Oh, I did. Interesting. I can't believe that."
Wild.
What a shock! What a shock! You mean me, little old me? No,
Yeah, but you know,
no,
like
sir.
we all get things wrong all the time, you know. Like
Yes, I know, and I'm I'm constantly like, yeah, I fucked something up, but like, you know, I
Yeah.
don't, you know, like I said, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but you and Anna are right. Thank you for talking about me behind my back, like.
Yeah. But it was nice. Anna just moved to London, so I was trying to assure her that you know, it's London is good. I mean, the UK not so much, but London's good. So, you know, like it is so it
Yeah.
was nice to see. It's nice to actually be in a room with people sometimes, you know. Things like that. So, yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you want to get this started?
Yeah, let's make Anna a podcast. Here we go. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I am an amateurish historian. And as always, I am joined by Dr. Eleanor Yanniga, who is anything but. We said we'd have an interview this week, but that got delayed when some schedules got pushed around, so we are continuing the Arthuriana for now.
Woo!
But first, we have a question from one of our patrons, Aurora, who says, "Hello, beautiful, silky podcasters. I just finished the episode on markets and marketplaces, which I very much enjoyed. Lately, for my own reasons, I've been reading Felipe Aries.
I'd say Aries. Yeah.
Yeah, Philippe Aries's The Hour of Our Death, which discusses cultural attitudes of death over the course of history, and in chapters where he describes the layout and architecture of charnel cemeteries and chapels, he mentions how in the early medieval period, these cemetery spaces would also serve in many ways as town squares any time before public buildings, such as city halls, were a thing that people would build. This makes a certain amount of logical sense, but it is something I'd never heard before, so I was wondering if Dr. Yanniga would be able to shed any more light on this topic. Aries does mention that this sort of thing happened mainly in the Faubourgs, medieval French suburbs, sort of, but he does also name-check Les Innocents in Paris a few times, so shrug emoji. Was this maybe just a French thing, or since the information in this book was written 40 years ago, was it a historical theory of the time that has since been debunked?
No, like he's bang on about this, and it's a quite interesting phenomena, and something that I've kind of alluded to, I think, in the past, but haven't made more explicit. So, especially when it comes to early papal stuff, it's all about hanging out in graveyards. And cemeteries are this incredibly fruitful, imaginative space for Christians. So, for example, when you have rivaling popes in the early days of the papacy, so kind of think like 5th century, 6th century, often when you're trying to lay claim to the fact that you are the pope, you will take up residence in a particular cemetery where you know that there are good relics and things like that. And so then you'll be like, well, you can see that I'm the pope because I am near all of these saintly corpses.
It's like a reverse grave robbing.
Yeah.
Like, instead of like taking the relics away and being like, look at all the relics I have, it's look at my graveyard where all the relics that I stand near. That's great. I love it.
Yeah, and like so, especially in the early medieval period, this is the thing, and everyone kind of uses cemeteries, right? So it's like, even if it's, cemeteries are very much linked to, even in small towns and things, they're linked to your church. So you're walking through them every time you go to church. You have things like, Renaissance has very famously had a really cool like charnel hall. It got shuttered, unfortunately, in the 18th century. I say unfortunately, but it was like so oversubscribed. So like basically they had to put everything into the catacombs, and that's where the catacombs in Paris come from. But it was like a very big cemetery that had like, a big church. It has a big charnel house, because like when you have such an oversubscribed cemetery, basically like you're leasing your grave. Is the way to kind of think about it. It's like you get a certain amount of time in the ground, and then eventually, like, skeletons will just kind of pop up out of it or whatever, and they'll be like, "Oh, whose head is this? I don't know. Go put it in the charnel house."
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, you have such a high turnover, but you also just have a lot more use with it. And this is something that I kind of talk about a lot, which is that medieval people are a lot more used to death. Right. They're a lot more comfortable with death. And they are a lot more, in and out of cemeteries, in and out of these places. So it's a gathering spot, and it's a place where, if you don't have buildings or whatever, it's kind of an open space. So if you need to get people together, it's one of those places that you can do it. But there's a lot of meaning imbued in this as well. So like, it's one of these kind of like big and important kind of places in the imagination, for the medieval imagination, right? And so, so the Renaissance is a very particular and spectacular example of this, but they are gathering places in a lot of senses and in a lot of places, and it has to do with the way that medieval people relate to death, the way they relate to the inevitable resurrection at the end of the world, what they kind of think and feel about body parts, and certainly about things like relics. So, it's just not the way that we think about cemeteries, but it's cool as hell. And I think that basically all this is to say, Aurora, yes, no, that is correct. This Renaissance is special, but especially in the early medieval period, this is very much a thing.
Cool. Yeah. Everybody loves a liminal space.
Oh, yeah. Oh God, yeah,
and
it's like
the veil between the veil between life and death, paper thin, or at least we imagine it to be, and that's what counts. I'm not joking.
No, you're right. You're bang on. Yeah.
Aurora, thank you so much for the question. If you would like to ask us questions like this that we answer here on the show, then please do subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. For just $5 a month, you get access to these episodes ad-free. You get access to our bonus episodes, like the one we just did on Giants last week. And then you get to ask us questions like these, access to the Discord, etc., etc. So, hit us up there so we have to stop asking like this. It'll be fun, I promise. But yeah, on to the main show. Now that we've spent 2 full episodes introducing Arthur, his canon, his friends and enemies, etc., it's about time. It's about damn time that we talked about some of these stories. But of course, that itself presents a huge problem because there's no single cohesive canon that is widely agreed upon by everyone, as you might have noticed. You could go with Geoffrey of Monmouth's early 12th century compilation of Arthurian lore, Historia Regum Britanniae, but that leaves out later classic stories that were added before the end of the Middle Ages. Likewise, Thomas Mallory's 15th century reboot of Arthurian legend, Le Mort d'Arthur, is expansive and has a definitive timeline bookended by Arthur's birth and death. But it also made some fairly odd choices about what to include and exclude, so that won't really work either. Alfred Tennyson's much later 19th century revival of the character, Idylls of the King, informs much of our current understanding, but also isn't terribly comprehensive, and it's certainly not medieval. So it looks like we'll have to piece together our own compendium of Arthurian legend based on the stories that Eleanor finds important, noteworthy, or generally fun. But that's also kind of hard because, there are well over 100 extant pieces of Arthurian writing from across more than 600 years during the Middle Ages. Though there are a lot of them, this doesn't mean there are 100 individually different Arthurian stories to sift through, as many of them are translations or retellings into new languages. These include Old Norman, Old French, Middle English, Middle French, Latin, Middle High German, Old Welsh, Middle Welsh, Norse, Franco-Italian, Anglo-Norman, Middle Scots, Old Occitan, Tuscan, and Hebrew.
There it is.
So we've decided the best way to attack them is by taking them chronologically as they were written in the Middle Ages, and we will be dividing them into 3 time periods based on the Geoffrey of Monmouth Galfridian model over 3 episodes. Today we will start with the pre-Galfridian stories, which are mostly Welsh and Latin and date from possibly as early as the 600s to 1136. Next time, we will enter our Galfridian era when we talk about Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae, originally published in 1136 and still sets the medieval standard for Arthuriana to this day. Finally, we will conclude the Arthuriana series with the post-Galfridian stories, which is where all of those translations start coming in from 1136 to about 1485 with the publication of Mort d'Arthur. So today we're talking about the early ones, and I'm going, to introduce them, say like a little brief bit about what we know about who wrote them or whatever, and then Eleanor's going to take it away because, I like Arthuriana, I know stuff, but I don't know much about these specific stories, and that's why I'm glad we're here. And this is not me talking down to myself. I just, I don't know. Culhwch.
I mean, this is deep. This is deep lore. This is deep
Yeah.
lore. Like, especially for the pre-Galfridian things, I was kind of like, yeah. So
we're starting today with Culhwch and Olwen, which is anonymous, probably based on a much older tale, but the one that we have was written in Middle Welsh, and likely dates to the early 10th or to the 10th century, and survives in 2 later Welsh prose collections from the 13th and 14th centuries, respectively. Eleanor, please tell us about Culhwch and Olwen.
Yeah, so this is a really important one, and I kind of was like, well, this is where you have to start, right? And so Culhwch and Olwen is very Welsh, as the name would indicate, and so the story goes a little something like this. So you've got Culhwch's father, King Cliff, son of Cliffon. I'm struggling with, because in Welsh, if you get 2 D's, it makes an F sound. So, I'm doing my best to not fuck up the Welsh, but guys, I'm gonna fuck it up. It's such a cool language. Apologies. Shout out to our Welsh loves. We love you all. Sorry of that. I'm like this, but anyway. So, King Silif loses his wife, Golifith, and she basically has a difficult childbirth, right, and dies. So he remarries, and we've got an evil stepmother on the scene.
Yes.
And so the young Culhwch rejects his stepmother more generally, and her attempt to kind of pair him up with his new stepsister, aka marry him off, right? Because and this is sort of something that you would see happen, especially kind of in the earlier medieval period. If you've got kind of like a new wife on the scene, you've got like an unrelated stepsister, right? You could kind of bring that together, and then that's a way of consolidating power and saying that there's no troubles here, right? But Culhwch is absolutely not. We're not doing this, right? Okay. So anyway, stepmom is get fucked. What an awful stepson I have. And she puts a curse on him. And she says, I'm cursing you, and you can't marry anyone other than the very, very beautiful Olwen. Now, the trouble with marrying the beautiful Olwen is she is the daughter of the giant Wysbaden Penquor. So, yeah. So, right. There's a problem. Shout out giants. We got some, right?
Yep.
And, going and asking a giant in order that that's going to be an issue, right? And they're
gonna grind your bones to dust,
right?
use it as salt on their meal, their meal of other humans that they've anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a nightmare at Thanksgiving, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's the thing. So Culhwch's never seen her, doesn't know anything, but he's just been cursed, so he's immediately like infatuated with Olwen, right? Because that's how the curse works. It's like, well, I guess I'm in love with this chick that I don't know who she is, but sure, why not? But his dad is like, yeah, you're not gonna be able to find her if you don't go get help from your cousin Arthur, right? Which it's also very funny. I like because all the names are just like it's like Welsh on 11, and then it's like and Arthur. So anyway, so basically, off goes Culhwch to find Arthur, right? And he finds Arthur at Arthur's court, Culhwch, which is at Cornwall, right? So this is like since we're pre-Galfridian, there's no Camelot yet. There's nothing like that, right? So it's just he's down chilling in Cornwall. Anyway, so Arthur is like, yeah, I will absolutely help you in whatever capacity you need, except for you can't borrow my sword, Culhwch, okay? And also you can't borrow my shield that also has a name. There's a bunch of naming all of his varying armaments, which Culhwch absolutely cannot borrow. And he also can't borrow his wife. Hey-o!
Woo!
Woo! Woo! No wife swapping here.
No cucking this time, baby.
That's not
that. No one likes that yet. Get out.
So he's like, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to send 6 of my finest warriors, who are Kai, Bedver, Welkmai, Gwither Gwalstwed, Menmu, son of Tirgwed, Sindlig, and Gwyffarf. I'm sorry, Welsh people. It's a lot. Okay.
Yep.
And there's also there's also a huge list of other people who have varying skills, Gwyn ap Nud, varying people like that. So it's very much kind of like Ocean's 11. We're going to kind of get the gang together and you son of a bitch, I'm in kind of deal. Right. So they're like, here's all these varying skills that they have. Here's all the ways that they're going to help Culhwch in his search for Olwen. Right. So they set off to reach the fairest of the castles in the world, which is the Giant's Castle. So they meet Ysbaddaden's shepherd brother first, who's called Custin. And his brother is like, look, yeah, that very nice castle, that's Ysbaddaden's castle. Also, I hate my brother because he took all of my lands off of me and he murdered my 23 children just for the fun of it.
Wow.
Which seems bad. And basically now he's a shepherd out in the lands. And so he's like, but look, since I hate him, I'm willing to kind of help you out here. So he sets up a meeting between Culhwch and Olwen. This is the first time Culhwch's actually seen the object of his desire. And Olwen is like, yeah, okay, I'll help you guys get into the castle. No sweat. I live there. Seems like a deal. And she's pretty receptive to the fact that Culhwch is into her, but she's like, but look, as hot as I think you are, as impressed as I am by your Ocean's 11 gang, I can't get married until my dad agrees to it. He's the chief giant, right? Trouble with this is Ysbaddaden doesn't want to marry Olwen off because there's a prophecy that he won't survive past his daughter's wedding. So, anyway, they're like, well, how are we going to get into this castle? So the Ocean's 11 it. They attack the castle by stealth. They kill 9 porters and 9 watchdogs. Nice little magic numbers here. And they get into the Giant's Hall. Ysbaddaden is like, all right, poison dart time. Cool. And attempts to kill Culhwch. Doesn't work. But so he gets outsmarted and he first gets killed by Bedwer. And then he gets slapped up by the enchanter Menwa. And then finally Culhwch actually slaps him down himself. And so he says, okay, fine. You can marry my daughter, but not until you complete a series of 40 absolutely batshit tasks. So kind of think like the Herculean tasks kind of deal.
Yeah.
So like he's got to go get the basket or hamper of Gwenu, and like he's got to go find like Mabon, the son of Modron, who is being held captive. And he's the only man who's able to hunt the dog Drydwin. Why do you need the dog Drydwin? Well, you need the dog Drydwin because he's the only dog that can track the Twitch-Twither boar and, you know, hunt down Ysgrythrwyn, who is the chief boar. Okay.
Classic.
Yeah, you know, all of these classic things. Now, there's these 40 tasks, but we only get to hear about, like, those main 3. And then the giant dies, and then Olwen marries Culhwch. So this fits really kind of neatly into earlier Arthuriana things, where really early on, they tend to center around stuff like killing boars. Like killing a large animal, like a dog, like a specific battle. So they are really, really close to kind of like older heroic tales. And that makes sense, you know, because this is Welsh literature. This is kind of like quite traditional. You've got all of these like super Welshy guys, Welshing out, you know, around the place. And so it's Arthuriana, but it slots very neatly into kind of like what we would expect of classic kind of tales from around this, of just like daring do, right? Yeah. So who are the characters that kind of stick around in Arthuriana here? Yeah. Okay. So Culhwch, obviously, he gets to kind of stick around because we've established he's Arthur's cousin, so he's family. You got Arthur himself, duh. Okay. And then you've got Olwen, and so Olwen kind of like sticks around as like, you know, this idealized, you know, because she's a real helpmeet. Not only is she like a hottie who's the daughter of a giant and, you know, controls the castle and everything, but she's sort of like helpful and like the right kind of wife, right? So she kind of really sticks around. Then you've got Gwelwood Gwethelfar, and he becomes Arthur's gatekeeper and porter. So he initially kind of stops Culhwch from getting into Arthur's castle. He's like, who the fuck are you? No, you can't come in here, kind of things. But he will come up repeatedly and indeed in the next thing that we talk about. And then there's also Kai, who becomes Sir Kay later on. And at this point in time, it's established that he is Arthur's foster brother. And then he is Arthur's central as well. And he eventually gets turned into one of the guys of the Round Table. Yeah. Similarly, you've got Bedwyr, and Bedwyr is the Welsh way of saying Bedivere. And at this point in time, it's quite interesting because Bedwyr, like the things about Bedwyr in this is that he's one-handed, and he's Arthur's marshal. And later on, he kind of like becomes a round table guy. But like they go on and on about like what a great warrior Bedwyr is. But later on, when we get into kind of like post-Galfridian things, he becomes like, no one likes him. And they're like, oh, he's a real like asshole. And he's like, he's definitely at the round table, but it's kind of like, he's seen as like quite sarcastic and like not very nice. But at this point in time, he's very important. You also have Gwalchmai, who becomes Sir Gawain. And Menwa this is one of my favorite. He's an enchanter knight. Yeah, I think he's like my favorite. Okay, because he's a shapeshifter, and he can do things like he can make the other knights invisible, which is like how they attack the castle. And he also goes and spies on the boars and their piglets. He like changes into a bird, so he can like, it's not like warging because he can actually change into it, but kind of like think about the spying capabilities of this guy. So I think that's cool. You've also got Gwyhir Gwalfelsted Lithoev. Great Welsh, Nora. I'm just kicking it. And he can talk to animals. Ooh. Which is how he finds Mabon, who's the guy who can find the dog. Nice. You've also got, I love it when people can use their powers to commune with animals. I think any setting. It's a really, really good one, right? Like, I think it'd have to be on the list of superpowers I would like. Yeah. Is chatting to animals. That'd be good. You've also got Ysgrythrwyn, who's the chief boar, head boar, number 1 boar, who comes up a lot. And there's also Mabon, son of Modron, who is the guy he's a prisoner who has to be on leave to go find the dog. And he is important because there is this common thing that comes up in a lot of these stories about how there's somebody who's imprisoned that they have to free in order to get help from. And he's one of those guys. So he's very important because of that, and because, of the sort of like legendary animal thing, which is incredibly important in early Arthuriana, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, what is all this, or I'm sorry, what does Culhwch and Olwen establish in the Arthurian legend?
Basically, this is one of the earliest things that we have. And what it's doing is establishing the world that we're talking about here, and a kind of a system of kinship that we can establish within it, right? So this is a Welsh story with Welsh people welshing about most Welshly, but we got Arthur down in Cornwall, and a kinship system that is like saying, okay, well, yeah, Cornwall, Wales, these are, two connected things. This is kind of like real Celtic vibes. We're Celtic now.
Yeah.
And it is also kind of like, here are all these heroic things. So it's establishing, you've got like a really big task that needs to be done somehow. The person to go see is Arthur. So even though the hero isn't at Arthur's court, it's understood that when you have like a big heroic thing that needs to be done, you need to go get Arthur on side, right? And so they can do that. That's the world that we live in. And it also gets these like really key characters in. So, here's Gawain, here's Bedivere, here's Kay. These are people who come up a lot. And granted, over time, their importance might wane or change. But that is really kind of establishing who these key players are. And it's kind of a motif thing. So, yeah, I mean, later on, hunting boar and things like that isn't going to be as important. But hunting boar is super important. Like the earlier, they just they like hunting boar. What can I tell you? Like it's kind of like a ready-made monster, right? So that is there, and you get things like the prisoner motif, who you have to go and rescue. And so what it does is it's got a really good kind of idea of a world that we're inhabiting. It's really kind of establishing what the canon is, like who's related to who, how do we relate to these people, right?
And that's our first one. And next we go to Pogr, which has a longer name in Welsh that I will allow Eleanor to attempt. It survives to us in anonymous fragmentary form, written in Old Welsh, probably based on a much earlier tale, but the fragmentary form survives to us as poem 31 in the 13th century Welsh manuscript, the Black Book of Carmarthen, which does sound like a cool, evil book for a fantasy series. But yeah, Eleanor, what's up with old Pogr?
Yeah, so we say Pogr because otherwise you have to say Ymfifin Arthur a Gwylfwyd Gwelfar, which means the dialogue of Arthur and Gwelwyd Gwelfar. Okay, right? So, and now here's a guy who was in the last story, right?
Yep.
So you've got your man there, Gwelfwyd, who is the porter, right? And we call it this because the very first line of this, it's a poem, and we've got about 9 stanzas of it because we've lost a bunch of it. Look, it's very old, okay? It's very easy to just kind of like lose things. And the first line of it is Pogr ye Porfarfer. So which means like what man is the gatekeeper? And Arthur says this, and then Gwelfith says, hey, it's me. It's your boy.
Hey,
Gwelwyd,
I'm here.
Gwelwyd. And he's like, whomst are you? And Arthur is like, hello, I am King Arthur, and here is my party. Who's in the party? Well, we've got Kai the Fair, the best man in the world, who you'll remember from our last one. And then he's like, okay, well, that's cool. But if you've got all these guys, says Gwelwyd, you're going to need to like vouch for them all. So he's like, here's all of my guys. We've got Mabon, son of Mordron, the dog guy. There he is. There's your boy. But also by now, Mabon, son of Mordron, is suddenly Uther Pendragon's servant.
Ooh.
So it's like Arthur's inherited him from his father. So look, he's gained a little bit of a biography. We've got Siskit, the son of Bannon. We've got Gwyn Godfreyan. We've got Manwyddan, the son of Lear. We've got Mabon, son of Melt. We've got Anwys the Winged and Lich the Windy-Handed, who very unfortunately don't come back up. I'm like, what the fuck does Windy-Handed mean?
Windy-Handed's a good one. I like that.
That's really cool, right? And like Anwys the Winged, I'm like, what do you have? Come back. I want to know.
Are we talking like wings or like winged hussar wings? Because both of those are cool. I'll take either one.
Either way, it's like cool as hell, right? So, but we don't really don't like they don't stick around. They're introduced here, and they probably existed, I would say, in kind of like the oral tradition or something, and earlier, and then they just go out of fashion. So we just don't have anything else on them. But apparently, they've been up defending Edinburgh. So again, we've got this Celtic connection, right? So like they've been up in Scotland doing the thing. And then there's Kai, the best man in the world, who would implore them while he slew them 3 at a time, which is all like, yeah, I've also been fighting people up in Edinburgh. Like, so there he's all like, this is the gang, So they then kind of like start talking about Arthur. And they're like, oh, my boy Arthur has just been fighting a battle against a witch in the Hall of Afernach. They also fought against Penpalach in the dwellings of Distach. And also he fought some of the Cencephalophiles, the dog-headed people, up on the Mount of Edinburgh. Which I think is very funny because you remember how we talked about in our math episode how it's like the dog-headed people move around? It's there's dog-headed people there, and then if you get there and there are no dog-headed people, they're like, Mongolia? I don't know. It's like, so anyway, at the moment, the dog-headed people are up in Edinburgh. There's also Bedver, who they call Bedver Perfect Sinew.
Ooh, my.
They're like, they're like, hey, check out the sinews on this guy.
Like, yeah, he killed a bunch of guys, but look how good he looked doing it. Look, he's so jacked. What's his regimen?
I know,
What's
right?
Your regimen, bro.
It's like, and it's like just very specifically focusing on the sinews. I'm very interested in what people find attractive or interesting. But like Bedver's got perfect sinews, slew his enemies by the 100, and fought ferociously on the shores of Twyford. Now. Then they all kind of like, Arthur starts jacking off about how good Kai is in battle. It's kind of gay. It's good. I mean, gay brackets positive. Okay. And then he kind of like interrupts himself. He's been like going at it. And then he's like, I had servants. It was better when they were alive. Before the Lords of Vemworth, Arthur says, I saw Kai at haste. So basically, before all this happened, like I'm thinking back to all the guys who died while we were off doing these things. And he says about Kai, not only is his vengeance heavy and his anger bitter, but when he drank from a horn, he would drink like 4. So mighty a warrior is Kai that his death can only be contrived by God himself.
Yeah, woo!
So, like, again, a lot of jacking off about Kai. But I think it's.
But you're building a canon right there.
Yep.
Now you got a prophecy about Kai. There you go. Now only God God can judge me.
Yeah, exactly.
Tupac and Kai both said that. Yeah.
Exactly. That's right. Tupac less famously in a kind of homoerotic relationship with Arthur. But how do I know?
Yeah,
could have been.
It could be.
It could be. So. Basically, then there's kind of like a lot of talking about how Kai and Landshaw fulfilled battles. Cool. Interesting to say fulfilled. Kai attacked 9 witches on the peak of Istfragwyn and a bunch of lions in Anglesey. Then they kind of like start in on a description of one of Kai's adversaries, which is the terrible cat of Palag, against whom Kai's shield was polished, and then we lose the manuscript.
No.
Which I would like to know more about the terrible cat of Palag. I would like to know more about anyone windy-handed.
Yeah.
Like
this is.
Yeah. Like it's good. It's setting up like lots of hijinks, right?
Yeah, this is brutal. You hate to see it. This is one of those they only got part of it, and they were like, "What the fuck? Finish the story." And the guy was like, I'll finish it when I finish it." And there you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like
shameful. Yep.
It does kind of the same things that we were talking about before. So we've got like all of these monsters. So it's like a catalog of monsters who were slain. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like there's big cats and there's witches and there's the dog-headed people and they're, so it's kind of like establishing all of these heroic deeds. And so it's very much in the vein of like heroic deed roll call kind of deal. And so, yeah, like very, very kind of similar vibe on it. And it's a shame we don't have more.
Yeah. Yeah, so what characters do we get here other than, I mean, obviously Arthur is talking to the gatekeeper.
Yeah. So we got Kai again, /K, right? It's he's great. He's very sexy. He fights cats. I don't know.
He looks so good.
He's so hot. He's slaying witches by the 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, again, you'll see the number 9 keeps coming up as like, that's important. Like the 3 times 3 thing is like like a deal. You've got Gwelwyd again, some more fleshed out. Not just someone who is saying, no, you can't come into Arthur's castle. It's like, it's a really interesting way of kind of using him as a character to establish other characters, right?
Yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah.
You've also got Mabon of Modron, who is, the dog guy, but also Uther Pendragon's servant. So we're fleshing him out. We're getting more of biography.
Yeah.
You've got Annwfn, the son of Lear, who, interestingly, is a really common character in other Welsh stories. And in other Welsh stories, Annwfn is the rightful king of Britain. So this is like a crossover thing, and it's also kind of helping establish, like what the importance of Arthur is, because it's like, if he's just like one of Arthur's homies, then that's kind of like,
that makes
yeah.
No, I love it. I do love that they're using like one established character to burnish another new one. So even if you're like, I don't care about this Arthur guy, but then like, Annwfn said he was good. So you're like, okay,
damn.
cool.
Okay.
That's where you use one of the like cool like legacy characters to like smooth the audience anger over about like a new character. So they're like, I don't like the new character. And you're like, no, look, your kindly old master loves this character. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's establishing a hierarchy and how that works. And then again, you get the Cat of Palag, who shows up in other things. Cat of Palag killed 180 warriors.
Ooh,
Cat of Palag haunts Anglesey.
Damn.
So there you go.
Better watch out for the Cat of Palag. So what does this add to the legend? Just fleshing out. Yeah,
like fleshing it out. So it's a really this is like, we get characterization here. So we get more guys, but it's also, as we were just saying, it's establishing that Arthur's important, right? So if you've got Annwfn, who's like just in his posse, it's like, oh damn, okay, like, so that's establishing a hierarchy at which Arthur is definitively at the top, which is what we saw previously as well. So it's like, Arthur's got the guys, Arthur's got the gang. You want to go see Arthur for varying things, and it's also like establishing all of the great feats. These guys are like, why should you care about these guys? Oh well, fighting the Cat of Palag, fighting all of these witches up there in Edinburgh. And it also kind of just like bumps the map out a little further. Yep. Right? So it's like, we are again sort of connecting the worlds of the Celts, the Celtic kingdoms, like what do these people do? How are they kind of moving back and forth? And so kind of understanding that this is a united kind of world. Right.
Yeah.
And because of the inclusions of Annwfn, like, you have the possibility to just kind of grandfather Arthur into those older and established literary worlds as well.
Yeah.
Right. So you're expanding. This is like real canon building stuff, which is why it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Nowadays they call this filler, but this is the stuff you need to to pull everything together to, because otherwise people are like, okay, but like, why should I care about, Kai? Yeah. And it's like, well, he killed the witches and the Palag, the Cat of Palag. What the fuck? Weren't you watching? Oh no, I skipped episode 6. You idiot.
And it's like he's the original, you know, it starts off with Kai, and then it kind of like switches over to Gawain, and then it goes to Lancelot, and then it goes to Galahad, right? There's kind of like this who's the most perfect knight thing that shifts over time. And like it starts off with Kai as being like the dude, right? And so it's quite interesting to see how that shifts around.
Yeah. Yeah, and next we have this is the third Welsh one that the third and last of the Welsh ones that we're gonna do today, and this is Preiddu Annwfn, and this is attributed to Taliesin.
That's how I would say, yeah.
Okay, who a man who lived in the 6th century. It survives to us, written in the Middle Welsh, in what is known as the Book of Taliesin, which is a 14th century reprint of a 10th century collection that was said to contain all of Taliesin's 6th century stories. So this Taliesin is a real person, so this would definitely be the earliest story in time that we have, but the way, you know, that, it may be from the 10th century a little bit later, you know, who knows, but regardless, so the story with the Preiddu Annwfn.
Yeah, okay, so you have this is a Pomi guy again, and I really like this one. It's only got like 9 stanzas or something that we have, and all of the way that it's kind of written is that there's like somebody doing an I statement at the beginning of all of it, and so it starts off with Arthur talking about what's going on with him, and he's like, "I'm on my ship, the Preiddu." And there's also 2 other ships. We are off to capture the cauldron of the chief of the other world, which is this realm called Annwfn. Annwfn is kind of like a sort of the fairy realm. It's sort of a land of the dead. It's a kind of generalized other world that you got to sail to. Okay. So they're visiting a realm that they call a Care City, which is has a which means revolving fortress. It's a 4-cornered glass fortress, and it contains hot young people who hang out, have feasts, make merry. It's got a wonderful, beautiful fountain. It's got a silent sentinel, and it's got a very doleful prisoner named Gwar. Okay, so what it's kind of establishing is this is sort of what we think of if we're going to talk about the fair folk, right? If we're going to talk about the fair folk and their realms, it's got all these things like, oh, everyone's like preternaturally hot.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in a glass castle. Oh, you've got like all of these magical fountains and things. So it's, you know, it's amazing, but it's also kind of set up to be suspect, if that makes sense. So it's like, oh, you should be kind of like on your guard, being like, why? And then you've got Gwar here, who is imprisoned in the fortress, and so he, you'll notice that we're on like prisoner count of 2, right? So you know, you always want to have some kind of that's how you know you're in an early Arthurian legend, because someone is in prison somewhere. Very creepily, he is imprisoned in the walls of this glass fortress in chains, and he's supposed to be there until Judgment Day, and he's kind of like singing perpetually, like he can't stop singing in front of what they call the spoils of Annwfn. So it's like part of the curse is that he's like locked in this wall and he's singing, and it's kind of like gross magic, where it's like he's always entertaining these kind of like you know, beautiful people within the castle. And he can't stop singing in front of this cauldron that Arthur is after. The cauldron itself is absolutely gorgeous. It's got a pearl decorated rim, and it's being heated by the breath of 9 maidens, again with the 9. And the claim to fame of the cauldron is it will not cook the food of a coward. Okay.
Damn right.
So, like, you got these hot young maidens breathing on the cauldron to heat it up. When they first breathed on it, instead of giving out food, it gave out poetry and spoke. So there's a lot of in this particular story about poetry and song and what all of that means. Like here you're getting a real emphasis on ideas of what makes a court great, right? Like this kind of artistic output. And then there's a bunch of stuff about an ox that's also decorated a lot. We find out eventually that the expedition completely fails. Only 7 people out of 3 shiploads return. They do not get the cauldron. It doesn't work. So this is a really interesting one because it's super, super early, as I say. And it is like, it's just very adventure-y in that kind of like early Arthuriana way, where it's like here's this big adventure that they go on and they don't win, and I think that's really important, right? Because in a lot of the other ones it's all like, oh yeah, like homie, and we slew those witches and we killed this guy and all of these things happen, and like people die, but they kind of like die in the way that like the guy whose name you just learned on Star Trek who goes down with Kirk is gonna die, right? Like nobody.
Oh no, Melshi.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's like, oh, no one cares about that, right? So this is kind of like establishing that actually Arthur is kind of fallible, and in particular, in the face of kind of like the Fae, he can't do anything, right? So it's like there is this other fairy world that exists. And that's quite interesting, too, in terms of, like, Welshness and Welsh ideas about, the cosmology of the world, right? Because, like, this is not something that is particularly common outside of Celtic cultures, like the idea of the Fae realm. And it's kind of coexisting and, like, coextant with all of the Christian ideas that you see within Arthuriana. So that is quite interesting. It's, even though we've only got like this little bit about it, I think that it's really important to note, just because it is so old and because it's so odd. Is the thing. It's very Welsh. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what crossover characters do we get here? We obviously got Arthur, but who else is in here?
Okay, so Welsh literature alert. Okay, we're going to be talking about some other Welsh literature. So you've got Pwyll, and Pwyll is the Prince of Dyfed and the husband of Rhiannon. There's a name that we still have that we can use. Rhiannon. Thank you. And he shows up in there's this type of literature. There are like the early Welsh literature. We've got this thing called the 4 branches of the Mevinogi or a Pedair Crank, something like that. I don't fucking speak Welsh. I'm so sorry. Welsh people. You deserve better. And he shows up in like the first branch of it, right? So this is a guy who exists again in other Welsh literature, and these are like the earliest prose stories we have in all of the literature of Britain. Are these Welsh stories? So Pwyll's in there, right? He's the chief of Annwfn, and becomes so because he helps its king Arwan, and he owns this cauldron. So Pwyll and the cauldron. And all of this, like, that is, again, being grandfathered in from this super, super old Welsh lineage. And that's part of what makes this story really believable as, like, an older, like, it might be 6th century, because, like, these are super old characters. Now, granted, it could be some 10th century person being like, I'm going to make this look reasonable by including these things. Like, that's absolutely on the cards. But it's such a kind of like deep dive into history that it makes it seem like it could be likely that this is super old, right? You've also got Arwan, and he is the king of the other world. And interestingly, later on, within Welsh literature and Arthuriana, he kind of becomes a bit of a psychopomp. And he shows up in kind of like the 1st and 4th branches of the Mavinogi, and there's also this common saying that like comes up. Did I talk about the other week? I read this really great book about the folklore of Wales about ghosts. And
I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, and there's this common thing that Welsh ghosts will say, if they're kind of like confronted and anyone's like, hey, what's your deal? And one of the things that they're like hanging out in a field saying is, long is the day and long is the night and long is the waiting of Arwen. And like the ghosts are saying this still in like the 19th century to people walking around. So it's kind of like they are kind of stuck there and haven't been ferried to wherever it is they're supposed to go now that they're dead by Arwen. So this isn't just about like establishing characters within Arthuriana. This is like explaining the fucking world of folklore in Wales more generally. Right? So that's like, shit's wild, right? Like this is like the importance of R1 cannot be overstated here. And finally you got your man Gwyr there, the son of Geoffrey, who's stuck in the wall. And we like him. So, I mean, my man's stuck in a wall. He's singing.
He's stuck in a wall singing. A fate worse than death. So what does this add to the Arthuriana?
I mean, like, Jesus Christ, doesn't it link it in with extant Welsh literature? Right? Like, it's what it's really doing is being like, Arthuriana, it's Welsh now. Like, you know, in order to think about Welsh literature at all, or Welsh stories about how they order, you know, the folkloric universe, it's like, well, now Arthur is in there, because if you have got characters like Powell and Arwen in there, it's like, all right, okay, done, right? We are being Welsh. So this is kind of like anchoring this in such a very specific way that you can't say that Arthur isn't important at this point in time, because if you've got all these other guys there, this is like, here it is, this is the worldview, fucking deal with it, right?
And
also it's just weird and I fucking like it.
You know? It's cool that they lost. It's cool that they just have to go back home and like, well,
yeah, because it's like, it
sucks.
Yeah, it's like and an interesting thing, because it's like, you know, before we're saying, oh, Arthur's important because, oh, you know, that really important guy, he's in Arthur's retinue. And this is like, Arthur's important, but he can't win them all. And these older extant Welsh traditions kind of like override him. Yeah. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Especially because the end of like Arthuriana of the canon is, you know, he can't win them all. He tried to create the perfect society, couldn't do it.
Can't do it.
Can't win them all. Yep. Next, we move into the Latin portion of this episode, and we get the Historia Brittonum, which is attributed to Nennius, and it's written in Latin as early as the 9th century AD, and survives to us in a couple of amended versions from the 11th century. So what do we got here with Historia Brittonum?
Okay, so this is does what it says on the tin. It is purporting to be a history of Britain, right? And it's like, let me explain to you what the history is. Here's all these things that happen. So Arthur shows up in chapter 56, and they talk about 12 battles that are fought and won by Arthur, who are called, and he's called the Dux Bellorum, or like a war leader. Instead of it, he's not called a king. He's called like a war leader, which is interesting because it's kind of like making it maybe seem more feasible as a historical document, because like, I don't know, man, do they have kings back then? I don't know. And I've like, it's not a huge section. I've got most of it here, and I was just going to read it because it's easy. So
go for it.
He says, at the time, the Saxons grew strong by virtue of their large number and increased in power in Britain. Hengist, who is another king, having died, however, his son Octha crossed from the northern part of Britain to the kingdom of Kent, and from him are descended the kings of Kent. Then Arthur, along with the kings of Britain, fought against them in those days, but Arthur himself was the Dux Bellorum, right, the military commander. His first battle was at the mouth of the river, which is called Glyn. His second, third, fourth, and fifth battles were above another river, which is called the Douglas, and in the region of Linneus. The sixth battle was above the river, which is called Bathos. The seventh battle was in the forest of Celadon, that is Catcoy Celadon. The eighth battle was at the fortress of Gwynnon, in which Arthur carried the image of the Holy Mary, ever Virgin, on his shoulders, and the pagans were put to flight that day. And through the power of our Lord Jesus Christ, and through the power of the Blessed Virgin Mary, his mother, there was great slaughter among them. Virgin Mary fucking loves slaughter.
Yeah.
She loves that shit. The 9th battle was waged in the city of the Legion. The 10th battle was waged on the banks of a river, which is called the Tribrute. The 11th battle was fought on a mountain, which is called Agnet. The 12th battle was on Mount Badon, and in which there fell in one day 960 men from one charge by Arthur. And no one struck them down except Arthur himself, and in all the wars he emerged as victor. And while they were being defeated in all the battles, they were seeking assistance from Germany, and their numbers were being augmented many times over without interruption. And they brought over kings from Germany that they might reign over them in Britain, right down to time in which Ida reigned, who was the son of Ebua. He was the first king in Bernicia. That's it. There you go. You can do it all like that, right? So that's interesting, right? And we have some characters who get introduced in this, not in this particular section, but which get introduced elsewhere. So you get Vortigern.
Right.
Now, Vortigern is this king who allows the Saxons to settle on Britain in return for marrying Hengist's daughter. Okay. They've got like a legend there where Vortigern is like, oh, I'm trying to build a stronghold near Snowdon, which is the biggest mountain in Wales, which is going to be called Adinus Emrys, and the building materials keep disappearing every time he tries to build it. And his advisors say, well, you need to sprinkle the blood of a boy born without a father on the site. It'll lift the curse. So they then go and find a boy to kill, to lift the curse, and that boy is Ambrosius. Ambrosius is another Arthurian character. He is a Romano-British kid. He is said to face down the Saxons. They wanted to use him to lift Vortigern's curse, and he's like, you can't lift the curse. It's not an actual curse. There are dragons buried under the ground, and that's what's disturbing them. So he's interesting because he gets introduced here into kind of like the Arthuriana of it. But he eventually, Gregory of Monmouth is going to seize upon him. And he eventually turns into King Arthur's uncle and Uther Pendragon's brother as a result. So, but it's very important that he's kind of Romano-British, because what they're doing here is they're establishing, like, here are kind of like the rightful British people who are around the shop, and there are the bad Saxons, boo, boo, right? So, yeah. Those are the newbies, other than Arthur.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess they just, Vortigern and Ambrosius, they just get added later, but since they're here in the Historia Brittonum in different places, they're kind of alongside, just fleshing everything out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what does this add to the legend?
This is the first time that Arthur is treated as a historical person.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this is like, this isn't the Welsh legend where it's like, hey, those guys you like? Oh, and here's Arthur. Right? Yeah. This is like, no, homie was battling. Homie killed 960 guys at this particular battle. I can tell you where every battle happened. Oh, look, there are Romans around, and I understand when Saxons, So it's basically saying Arthur is a historical guy, and he exists here. You will also note the overt Christianity. Right?
Yeah.
So before we got Arthur being like, I'm going down to the fairy realm. Way, hey, oh, like, damn, fairies got hands. Right? Like, okay, I'm going to fight the fae.
Fae got hands. Fuck.
And this is like, that's not what's going down. This is Christian time. Carry in the icon of the Virgin Mary. So we're making it more Christian, and we're making it historical. It's no longer just it's
filthy pagan Welsh nonsense.
Yeah. So it's kind of like you can see how we are coming forward in the medieval period, right? Because it's like you want to make these Roman connections in order to prove that something is real. There's more of a desire to make things make historical sense. There's less of and also you notice it's much more British.
Yeah.
Like, we're not just talking about, like, Celtic people being Celts most Celtically.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah. And, then we get an Annales Cambriae, which is by an anonymous writer, written in Latin in the mid-10th century, and survives to us as a 12th century copy of the original. So, Eleanor, what is the story here?
Okay, so this is like kind of a chronicle, or an annal, right? So what it does is it purports to just like write out a number of years, and it's like, and here's the thing that happened in the year. So again, I've got the whole text of it for you that concerns Arthur. All right. So we got 516, the Battle of Badon, in which Arthur carried the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ for 3 days and 3 nights on his shoulders, and the Britons were the victors. Okay, so that's what we just heard about. 521, St. Columba is born, the death of St. Bridget. Cool. St. Bridget comes up in Arthuriana and things like that. 537, the Battle of Camlin, in which Arthur and Medred fell, and there was a plague in Britain and Ireland. The end. That's what's up, right? Okay. So,
cool.
In terms of Arthurian characters, I mean, not really. I mean, we got Bridget being in there or whatever, like, but she's about at the time. But, so what does this do in terms of the legend? It's like, it's doing this. It's not only is it saying Arthur is a historical person, it's like, and we have dates. Right?
Yeah.
It's like 516, 537. These are times when we know that Arthur was out there fighting. So he's definitely even more historical at this point, and I can tell you exactly when this fucking happened. Right?
Yeah.
So
now
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
But so basically, yeah, it's just like a chronicle like this, or an annals like this is, it's essentially establishing a timeline about how you're supposed to understand history, and it's saying that if you want to understand the history of Britain in general, you have to understand that Arthur was real, and this is what he did. Yeah.
Now, was that a precursor to Mordred, or?
Yeah. Like, I think, so this is kind of like this is just an older way of saying it, basically.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep, and then, our last one for today, which is the Gesta Regnum Anglorum, which was written by Richard of Malmesbury in Latin around 1125. It's an attempt at drawing together the varying accounts of Gildas, Bede, Nennius, and various other chroniclers to make a history of England.
Yep.
Eleanor.
So this is a really interesting one, because it's like there's all these other histories, and like basically Richard of Malmesbury is like, I'm going to like make the ultimate one. Right. So like he's going lore. Okay. So he starts out with the Saxon invasions in 449, and he talks about Arthur defeating, the 900. He's like 900 and not 960, but you have that. Yeah. But you see, he's saying like 449 is when they come in, and it's like, and then, so by the time you get to 512, you're going to be needing an Arthur, right? So it considers Arthur as historical. It's got Ambrosius. But Ambrosius is his employer, right? So you got Ambrosius like being a guy who's like paying him, all right? You also have Malmesbury talks about how he finds a tomb of someone called Olwen, who is supposedly Arthur's nephew in the time of William the Conqueror. So there's this interesting kind of attempt at historization, where they're like, oh yeah, and we found Arthur's nephew Olwen's tomb in 1066 or whatever. So like that's, and it's like, who the fuck is Olwen? Right? Like
everybody knows Olwen.
Yeah, and it's
that
like
guy we all love.
So like that's basically it's pretty straightforward. Everybody loves this whole like defeating 900 Saxon story. Yeah. You got a Roman in there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what's going on. In terms of the characters, there's Olwen. I mean, lol, never comes up again.
Olwen has the effect of like something where like all of the other references to him have been lost to time, but like was a character like, oh, Olwen, and people at the time were like, oh my god, no, Olwen died. It's so sad. And now we're just like,
who the fuck is that?
Who's Poochie? What is this, Roy? Get the fuck out of here, man.
Exactly. It's like maybe he was a guy that people knew about, but I don't fucking know who homie is. I'll tell you that. So
Walnut. Get out of here, Walnut.
Yeah, like no one want to hear it. No one want to hear this at all, basically. And And then again, we've got some further info here on Ambrosius. So it's like establishing that he's in the story, right? And at which point in time, I will tell you that this is indeed a kind of a guy. So he was a Romano. Yeah. He was a Romano-British guy who did some warring against the Saxons in the 5th century, which is what Gildas says. Okay. He also shows up in the Legends of the Britons, in the Historia Brittonum, which is in the 9th century. And then Geoffrey of Monmouth, when we talk about it next week, gives him a bit of a glow up. We're going to have to talk about that next week, right?
Yeah. And so what does Gesta Regnum Anglorum do for the legend?
Yeah, so it's like, again, just like adding to this historicization, right? You've got this, we're giving more of a backstory to Ambrosius. We are, there is this thing about just repeating the same story over and over again, which kind of like gives it a credence. So this is like, again, like definitely we know now that Arthur's killed 900 Saxons or whatever, or 960, whatever it is you want. And so it's like a far cry from like killing a boar so that your cousin can marry someone, right? So it's a real differentiation from like, he's the king who lives over in Cornwall. It's like, yeah, well now he's working with Romans. Now he's like fighting Saxons. Now he's kind of shifting more and more into kind of a British entity. He's less Welsh. He's more Christian. And he's linked to, the Romans, which is to say the church more generally. Yeah. Right. So you can't really have a great leader if he isn't linked to the Romans. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a good summation of the pre-Galfridian era. It goes from, these obviously Welsh stories, that, just sound like cool tales of guys you want to hang out with, and then it becomes, more incorporated and focused, and they're trying to provide like, they're trying to provide a canon and like, a history in a way to like process these characters in the real world. And I think it's pretty cool. You see that over 400 or 500 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a really interesting one because it's hard to track these things, as you've done a good job pointing out. We don't exactly know when everything is from. A lot of this is guesswork, but you can see a kind of narrative begin to develop. And that's what's important.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could see, and I mean, like, you could see it like, it was 960. He's like, well, it wasn't 960, it was 900. Like, we're like, 960. That's what they used to say back in the battle days before we knew better. It's like, it's 900, idiots.
Yeah,
He's, it's like, oh no, he didn't kill like 10 guys with his sword in one throw. It was only 8. Be realistic.
Yeah,
idiots. Yeah, I love it. It's delightful. It's the same tricks you use to build things today. You just like, you build a history and contextualize it enough, and then you're like, you have this legend, and someone's like, well, I think it was the 960, and someone else like, oh, it's 900.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That quibbling is so
arguing
cute.
On the forums about it. Yeah.
It's like the quibbling is part of this kind of like historization and legitimization about the whole thing. It's like if you can argue about whether or not that other 60 guys were in there, then that makes this all legit, I think you'll find.
Yeah. And Walwyn. Oh, Walwyn.
Oh, my boy.
We hardly knew ye. Yep. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Just some guy that's basically lost to us for all of time. It's just like, Walwyn. They were like back in the day, he was like the coolest one. Like, oh man, we love Walwyn. He was so much better than Kay or Kai. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for us today with, the pre-Galfridian Arthurian stories. Next time we will come back and we will talk all about Geoffrey of Monmouth's huge compendium that kind of categorizes all of these things, puts them together, tries to give them not only like a history and a timeline, but also like some characterization and at least tries to stick it all together and see what comes out in the end. You will be the judge as to how successful he was. But but that's coming up next time on our continuing Arthuriana series. Eleanor, what's going on with you in the meantime?
Yeah, baby, I'm here. I'm on the social media platforms at Going Medieval, doing whatever. You can find the blog at going-medieval.com. If you want to hear me talk some more, you can check out my other podcast, Gone Medieval. And you can always get my book, The Once and Future Sex. That'd be nice. I'd like that.
Yeah.
Make me happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you should do that. And you can find me at Lucas Amazing wherever on the sites, and you can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic. It's wherever you listen to podcasts like this. You can find that one too. So check it out. And other than that, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.